So, hello everyone. Warm greetings from me and Dr. S. Natesh. I hope you can hear me. Um, so very excited to be here as part of the Hortus festival. In fact, as someone who has worked on the Hortus Malabaricus, which talks about 700 or so herbal products from the Malabar coast and the Konkan coast, I think it's very appropriate to have this session at a literature festival which is titled as Hortus. And I was very excited to go through Dr. Natesh's work, which is on iconic trees of India. In fact, it's very rare that a botanist actually looks at the cultural history of trees, and that is what I found most exciting about his work. And today, when we look at academics, particularly from the field of anthropology of the forest, or if you look at it from the perspective of environmental history, we're constantly talking about the post Anthropocene and how it is very, very significant for us to look beyond human centric histories, where a lot of emphasis has been made on anthropocentric histories of how we look at the environment just as a system to sustain human life. And Dr. S. Natesh's work, it actually decenters humans from the central narrative and focuses on the flora, focuses on trees. So I found it very amusing that he titled the work as Iconic Trees. So why do you use the term iconic trees?
Thank you. Firstly, good morning to all of you, and my heartfelt thanks to the Manorama Hortus organizers for inviting me to be here with you, and thank you, Malavika, for being here. Um, well, um, Let me start by saying that every country has some remarkable trees of their own. And if you look through the literature, they refer to it as heritage or iconic trees or remarkable trees or landmark trees. And like this in the literature, there are about 60 names attached to such trees. Notwithstanding what you refer to them as, the meaning is the same. An individual tree from a whole community of trees which stands out in some unique, remarkable, and unusual manner, either because of its appearance or because of the value it brings to the whole community. And I have referred to them as iconic trees. That is one of the names that is used among those 60. As such iconic trees are worthy of our notice. Um, if we are aware of them, we can appreciate them. They actually are representatives of our culture, heritage, and as such, they share our common heritage with us. And therefore, because trees live for so long, you can relate to past events. And they may be very happy events, they may be sad events. Um, Happy events like a marriage happened under some tree, or some great sage was sitting under the tree, or meditated, and so on. Or some trees have been used for beheading criminals, for hanging political uh, opponents, and so on and so forth. So there are so many reasons you can associate with trees, and therefore they require our attention. They require our admiration, even veneration, and therefore they need to be um, conserved, preserved, and passed on to our descendants. So that's the reason I call them iconic.
I think that's quite interesting. In fact, when we environmental historians, when we look at trees, we do not look at them from a botanical perspective, though parts of we also borrow a lot from botany. We kind of look at them as cultural artifacts. Trees as storytellers, and we kind of try to map the cultural biography of trees. For instance, I had a paper which came out this year. It was titled as If Our Banyan Trees Could Talk. Now, on the one hand, you think of the banyan trees as a space of meditation, the banyan tree as a space of peace, of tranquility, and so on. But for a large chunk of our people, particularly those who come from marginalized backgrounds like the Dalit Bahujan people, these trees served as trauma locus. Where, because the banyan trees would be in and around the vicinity of the temple, the tree would represent the boundary to which they could enter into the temple. Or these trees would remind them, like you have a song, a folk song from Kerala, which is called as the Song of Pumata. The last couple of verses of the song refers to Pumada being tied to a banyan tree and being set on fire. So the same tree which represents tranquility for some can represent trauma for others. And I think you've done the same thing. You've used trees as narrative pieces or as storytellers throughout your work. Two particular trees which I found immensely interesting from your work is the tree from Lakidi, which is associated with the legend of Karindandan. And then again, you have a section which is titled as The Green Colossus of Connolly. And we are in Calicut now, and very close to this, maybe in 10 kilometers radius of us, we have the bungalow where Connolly was murdered during the Mapla Malabar rebellion. So it's quite interesting to use trees as narrative modes. Would you like to share more anecdotes about these trees or some other trees?
Well, trees in my book, for sake of convenience, I have categorized them under some heads. For example, trees that come from an age which is so ancient. So, age is a criterion for calling them iconic. The second category I used was physical dimensions of a tree, the tallest, largest, broadest, which is the largest tree in India, or which is the oldest tree, that kind of thing. The third one would be botanical curiosities. For example, there is a tree in Bangalore on which 630 honey hives are located. This is a world record. Usually, the largest number of honeybees hives that have been recorded in any tree is about no more than 200. Now, 630 honey hives have been recorded on this one tree. There are a couple of trees in Jodhpur where they're banyan trees on which the largest number of bats colonize. So, like this, there are trees which are botanical curiosities, are also very uncommon introductions. There is one tree which is a giant sequoia. Giant sequoias are totally endemic to the western uh, coasts of California, Sierra Nevada mountains, and they don't occur anywhere else unless they have been cultivated. Now, there is one tree in this entire country, just one tree of giant sequoia in a place near Gulmarg. It's called, Yarika, a small village where the CSIR has an institution. And there is one tree of giant sequoia. So it can produce cones, it's a conifer, and but nobody has ever seen a seedling under it. So it has existed there for 90 years, 95 years now. It's able to produce reproductive bodies, but it cannot produce seedlings. Forgotten by those who introduced it, unknown outside its existence, out inside that boundaries of that institute, and all alone. Possibly, my guess is it's the only tree of giant sequoia in the entire South Asia. So I have called it the loneliest tree in India. So, like this, there are trees that are botanical curiosities like this. Then there are trees which are related to history, either associated with a person or an event or a place in history. You have several examples of that. For example, your Connolly's plot. It's the first teak plantation, man made teak plantation in the world. And it started in 1842 by Connolly, who was, as you said, the magistrate and the collector of this area. Very interesting to, addition to this footnote to the story is he had an assistant called Sergeant Graham. And Sergeant Graham decided to resign because he said he cannot suffer the indignities and hardships of that area, mosquito, malaria, you have to cross the river each time. And also because of the indignity to have to take off your trousers each time you get into the river. And that's what recorded by him. And so he resigned. So they have brought in a local Keralite called Chatu Menon, who is considered as the father of teak plantations in this region, and indeed anywhere for that matter. And he stayed with this plantation for something like 18 years or so. Fortunately, he was recognized by his British masters and awarded and rewarded for it. And today there is this some 2.5 acres of this old 1842 uh, teak plantation still surviving as a remnant of that. So historically, plantation is very interesting. Connolly, of course, was a historically important person, and so was Chatumenon. So, from the viewpoint of history, this is an example. The other plant that you refer to, other tree, is the chained tree of Lakedi. Now, this is a very interesting folk tale around it. The British, even as long as the uh, 19th century, this whole Wayanad was full of tropical rainforest. And the British wanted to, transport timber from here to Mumbai because teak was important to them for shipbuilding. But there was no road through the jungle, and they didn't know how to make one because it was so densely, populated by these trees. So one of the British engineers is supposed to have contacted a tribal boy called Karintandan, Paniya tribal person. And the boy knew this jungle like the palm of his hand, and he told him the shortest route to make this road. And the road was built. And then the engineer, the British engineer, did not want to share the glory or the money or reward money. So the story goes that he shot the boy and hid his body in the bushes. Now, goods and people started moving along the road, and suddenly there was an increase in people dying on that road. So, an alarmed local populace felt that it was actually the ghost of Karintandan which is actually attacking these people, and therefore something needs to be done. Again, the story goes that they called a local priest sorcerer who actually did some rituals and tied the soul of this boy to the tree with a chain. So you can still chain a big, huge iron chain on this tree. Whether it is true or not, I don't know. There is no hardcore evidence to support this. But nobody takes a chance. If you move on that road, every motorist, every truck driver will stop his car or truck there and light a lamp or light an incense and leave a few coins and move ahead. So there are trees like this of historical, folklore, mythological importance. I have also chosen trees which are arranged in unique manners or used in a unique way. For example, from the India rubber tree, they make these bridges across rivers in Meghalaya by the Khasi Jaintia people. So I called the bridges that breathe, and it's the India rubber tree, and it's amazing biological engineering with nothing, no hardcore technology. I mean, they make you can 100 people can stand on it. Now there are double-decker bridges, one above the other, and now they're building a triple-decker bridge on top of the second also. So this is an amazingly interesting thing, and why would it not be iconic? So, like this, my emphasis all over the country has been to look for such trees for any one of these 5, 6 reasons and then put them in the book and bring them to the notice of our people in this country.
This tree in particular, the chain tree at Lakidi, this is quite interesting for us Malayalis because there's quite a debate raging now about Karindandan, whether he's a myth, whether there was an actual Karindandan. So they've installed a statue now from where the gods start of Karindandan. And there's a movie which is being made on Karindandan by director Leela Santosh. And adding to what I was saying earlier, a lot of subaltern figures, whether it is Karindandan or whether it is the ghosts of widows, or whether it is the ghost of characters like Neely, for instance, they're supposed uh, to be put into these trees by oracles or by people who had issues with them. So also, I think you can have an actual session on trees and ghosts, or how ghosts are interred into these trees. So when you look at trees, quite often what we forget is that trees also have their social history, and how trees shape our histories even as they are shaped by them. So trees have different meanings in different contexts. For instance, when Pundanam speaks about trees, he uses trees as an allegory to refer to the karma siddhanta, or the idea of karma, and he says that the most blessed souls, they are born in their next birth as trees, because trees are the most noble creatures. Then again, you have reference to trees in Sangam literature, early historic Tamil poetry in different contexts. In fact, you have the Tinays being named after several trees. So you do have trees being part and parcel of the meaning making process. And when I read your book, in many ways, it seems to be an ethnography of trees. And as you were telling me earlier, you're someone who visited all these trees and tried to map their histories and draw out the cultural context in which they are located. And you've also kind of married botany and local lore together. So was this a very conscious effort on your part?
Well, there are people here like Professor Ravindran here, who is an expert on sacred plants and many other things, of course. He he knows much more about the issue that you raised about. In many polytheistic religions, um, trees are central to the concept of heaven. Paradise is a place which is inhabited by trees of Lebanon, firs of Lebanon, and so on. If it is not heaven itself, trees are at least considered as a stairway to heaven. And gods reside in them, spirits reside in them, and trees themselves represent gods in many cases. Take the people, for example, or what we call Ashwatha. Now, Ashwatha is the embodiment of the Holy Trinity, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara. You look at Bilva. Now, the very darshan of Bilva and the very fact that you touched the Bilva tree guarantees that you go to heaven, because it is the most sacred tree among many others. The favoritist tree of Shiva. It represents three leaflets of that tree represent the three gunas: tamas, rajas, and um, what is the third one? Anyway, you know which one I'm talking about. It also represents the three eyes of Shiva. It represents the trident of Shiva. And God Lakshmi is supposed to inhabit that tree. And the consort of Shiva, Parvati, and many other forms of goddess Shakti are supposed to reside in different branches of the tree. So, similarly, Audumbara, or what we call Ficus racemosa, is equally important in many respects. So, God spirits, bad spirits, good spirits, all of them reside in that tree. For example, you have pala trees, Alstonia scholars. You have Palakkad. The name comes from pala trees, the forest of palas, a Palakkad. So there are many places in the north which are like this, named after trees and so on. So my journey through all this was, and my emphasis has always been that of a botanist. But I have gathered any other information that I get along the way. May be social, cultural, political, or any other thing, religious, mythological, folklorish, and try to put them all together and see which tree fits into which um, bottle. And early on, I decided that, you know, when I go on this quest, I'll only write about trees which I actually see for myself. and not write on any tree which I haven't visited in the community in which they are embedded. So that's why it took me something like 8 years to write this book, going crisscrossing across all parts of this country, from northeast to south to everywhere. And it also meant uh, that the delay also was caused by COVID. In between, logistics went haywire, and sometimes language is an issue when you go to some place, so you need to find the right kind of people. So but the emphasis has always been on the joy of finding those trees and then creating a narrative around them which will interest people. And therefore, whatever else comes through in that process um is a bonus to me. Thank you.
All right. Uh, in fact, as a historian, when we are trained, particularly when we look at texts and documents, we are trained to scrutinize them. And I was looking for a critique of the for this work, and I felt initially that you're not included Ammachi Plav. And for a Malayali, this seemed to be a very big omission, but you've given me a great justification for it. Maybe the audience would also like to know.
Yes. Um, in a book like this, there is always be some limitations. There will always be omissions because some may be practical, because there is a limit to pages you can compile a book. Also, you need to finish this work at some point of time. It's always arbitrary. You want to get the monkey off your back. I don't know whether other authors feel like that, but when you are carrying that monkey for 8, 9 years, you want to finish some work somewhere. Secondly, this book of 75 trees is about living trees of India. Now, Amma Chiplao is a very powerful story, um, but that tree is not living anymore. Initially, we included trees which are not living in this book, and I called it the chapter in memoriam, to pay homages to those trees which are no longer with us. And then, because of the page limitations, the editors were suggesting too many cuts. I said, let's remove this altogether. And I have now enough material to bring out another book on such trees.
There will
So
be a sequel to this.
I don't know, but yes, I have enough material to write another book on trees that are not with us anymore, but they are equally iconic. Their stories are equally powerful. They have made an impact on us as a country, and we have been affected by their presence whenever they made that impact. So, more uh, importantly, I have not been able to visit every state of this country because of the limitations that I told you. If COVID did not intervene, I might have gone to more places, collected more trees. I could not visit Arunachal, for example, which is one of the hottest of hotspots of biodiversity. And I know lists of trees which I have made, which I would love to visit. But learning has no limitation. A book has a time limit, but learning has no limitation. And I am still continuing to actually go to places, collect information and data and stories about all those. And hopefully, the states which I have not visited, I will complete them. And I have enough material, I tell you, to do justice to such a work.
And I find it very, very refreshing that you went to each of these states and you only mentioned those trees that you have personally visited, because we live in a time of armchair environmentalists and armchair anthropologists and armchair archaeologists. So to see a botanist actually go visit, understand the cultural milieu of each of these trees, I think hats off to you for doing that. Which also brings me to my second question, which is also a minor critique. If you go through this work, Iconic Trees of India, you will see that what he has done is he has categorized the trees according to the states. So, four trees from Kerala, maybe five trees from Tamil Nadu, a couple of trees from Karnataka, so on and so forth. But purely from an hermeneutical point of view, I felt that it might have made more sense if you had categorized them thematically. And we as Indians are very high on categorization. People who know Ayurveda in the crowd would acknowledge that if you look at Ayurveda, trees, as you mentioned, are categorized according to their gunas. So you have sattvic trees, you have rajoguna trees, and you have tamoguna trees. And again, the categorization extends into Vaishya trees, Shudra trees, Kshatriya trees, and Brahmana trees. Uh, so you have, and it, in a way, I understand why you've done that, because it makes it a very lucid read. But as a historian, if you had actually thematically categorized it, let's say, into trees and politics of India, for instance, you do mention trees which are associated with Gandhi, the tree which is there in the cellular jail, the trees associated with Tipu Sultan, for instance, or maybe trees and lore. I think it, from a historian's point of view, that might have been a better way in which the themes could have been arrayed.
Well, yes and no. I'll tell you why. It's very interesting because before I did this, I went through a whole process of, for a whole 6, 7 months, this was my worry. How do I put them in order in the book like this? Um, Unfortunately, trees don't lend them so neatly to such categories. Okay? Uh, a tree which is only for religion, a tree which is only for mythology, a tree which is only for Ayurveda, a tree only for history. No. I'll just give you one example. It will make this illustration of this will be clear. There is a people tree or Ashwatha tree in a place called Vidurashwatha in Karnataka, but Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh border. And this tree is called Vidurashwatha or Viduras Ashwatha because he is supposed to have planted it. Therefore, a mythological reference to a mythological character, Vidur, who planted that tree because after the Mahabharata war, everybody was in a depression and Vidura was so much more in distress because he advised people not to go to war and all his relatives have been killed except the five Pandavas. And then those days, of course, you didn't have psychiatrists and so on. So he went to Krishna and said, "What should I do? I'm so depressed." And Krishna said, like a good psychiatrist, go on a pilgrimage, spend time peacefully in the woods. You will eventually find peace. And it is said that Vidura set out on a pilgrimage and ultimately came to this place called Vidurashwatha. The place is also called Vidurashwatha. And there, one day when he was doing his evening prayers in the river, a people seedling came into his hands. And then he took it to the sage who was residing there nearby and said, I have found this in my outstretched hands for prayers. What shall I do with this? So he said, this is the embodiment of the Trimurti, Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara. And therefore, plant this. The Trinity will bless you and you will have peace of mind. Ultimately, it is said Vidura planted the tree. It is said that he gained peace of mind at the end of the day. And the tree is supposed to have been planted by him, so it is very venerated. And also, people next to the people or next to the base of the people, stone images of stone gods or snake gods are planted. Childless couple go there and worship these trees. And if you today go to Vidurashwatha, you will find a million snake god, idols under the people tree. And therefore, it is important from the religious wish granting point of view. And lastly, this tree was also a witness to a political event in the freedom struggle movement, where in the old Mysore state, which was ruled by the Wadayars, there was a protest by the local Congress people, and the police actually fired, and some 5, 6 people were killed on the spot. So, this has been a mute witness to an event in history. So, where do I put this tree? As a mythological tree, or a religious tree, or a politically important tree, historically? So, I thought about it. So, finally, I came to the conclusion the best way to put this is in a geographically spread manner. And I tell you, it is interesting because the first thing you will do when you see my book is How many trees are represented from Kerala or Karnataka or Maharashtra or Andamans? So it's a natural curiosity of people, and many people have told me, "Oh, you have only 5 trees from Kerala. Why? We have so many from Karnataka." So it is, one way of doing it. There could be other ways of doing it. So this is the way I ended up doing it.
I think it's a very safe way to do it, but it's also very justified from your
Sure.
answer. And it's I find it wonderful that you link Vidura and the pilgrimage that he made to mental health, and how this tree might have actually helped him in his process of healing. Because there are works like Eduardo Korn's How Forests Think, and that's a book that I recommend to everyone here, where they talk about the fact that you can take the human out of the forest, as we did long time ago, but we cannot take the forest out of the human, because we think with and we think through the forest, think with and think through trees, and they hold such meaning in our culture. For instance, we talk about the family tree, we talk about the tree of evolution, the tree of enlightenment, so on and so forth. So one last small question to you. You've chosen a particular style of illustration throughout your works, where trees are represented, but so much more than trees are also represented. And I gather that there are illustrators in the crowd, so this might also be interesting for them. So, is there a particular reason why you chose those kinds of illustrations to accompany your work?
Well, I had photographs from wherever I went. Of course, in one place, my camera was stolen and I lost some 500, 600 images in Uttarakhand. And otherwise, I would have included more trees from Uttarakhand also. So, initially, I was thinking that I would put photographs with all the trees. The publishers had another idea. If you look at the last 2, 3 years, there are 3, 4 books that have come out on trees from different parts of the world, including from Kew Gardens and so on. For some reason, all of them are now using watercolor paintings. And the publishers thought that would be a better idea because, that is the trend, number one. But it was a little tough for me to digest that in the beginning. And the illustrator they sent me was somebody who was a specialist in portraiture, and he had never done botanical illustrations. So he did some 3, 4 paintings from my photographs, and I said, okay, I can work with this guy. And I must salute him because he put up with a lot of demands that I had. I say hats off to the guy for his patience. Ultimately, he produced a set of drawings which are really classy. And I had to explain to him why this photograph, what needs to be emphasized in that drawing. But he has lived up to his reputation. And there is a case for putting photographs, definitely. But there is also a case for putting such illustrations because they become interpretations of the photographs in a way through the eyes of the author and the illustrator. So, what I have now decided is I have already developed a blog where I will upload the photographs that I have for access to people. And I think they would complement each other. So I think that's the kind of compromise I will make.
But this is not a compromise at all. I think the illustrations add a lot
They're very
to
good.
the work.
They really add
Not
value to the book. Very
because
good.
there are also minute details in those illustration, and not just not just an illustration which goes with it, because they also tell a story. And as Timon Ingold put in his work called Botanical Becomings, it's also another wonderful work if you're someone who's interested in environmental studies, environmental history, or the history of forests. This is a go-to work for you, Botanical Becomings. And he says that human beings, when you look at the long history of humans and forests, what you will see is that our becoming, the ways in which we imagine ourselves as beings in time and space, that is intimately linked to the anthropology of trees. And with that, I think we can move to maybe one or two small questions from the audience, if one question from the audience, as the organizers inform me.
Hi, thank you for this wonderful talk. Um, I my question is about actually bamboo, which is grass, but I don't know if it's relevant. But I'm still going to ask it. I've recently noticed, or I've heard that bamboo is way more cherished in cultures outside India in the East. For example, in Japan, in China, and if it is within the context scope of this conversation, do you know why bamboo has gone to the has it gone to the has it been forgotten in India, and if not, can you comment something on this?
Okay, bamboo has not been forgotten in India. I mean, the whole flute of Krishna is bamboo, and you can't live without that in India. It is used as a musical instrument and therefore cherished by musicians. The making of it, the specifics of making it, they're all very relevant here. Bamboo is also used as a scaffolding material in constructions, architecture. These days, there are so many other uses of bamboos. If you go to the Northeast, people say, and correctly, that bamboo is something for everyone and everything for some people. So it is also true that China and Japan and other places have made very good use of bamboo. And if you ask me, bamboo has never been any less important for us in our culture, religion, myths. There's so many things that you can say about bamboos.